welcome to the Transformational Podcast, a conversation between brothers about practical ways faith is impacting our lives. We invite you to join us on this journey as we are learning to let faith transform the way we live. We are glad you are with us today and look forward to sharing our journey with you. Now let's jump in.
All right, let her roll. Let her rip, Tater Chip.
All right, then welcome to the Transformational Podcast.
You're going to leave that in there.
I am going to leave that in there because I liked it. I thought it was good. I'm the Marine from Maryland. You've got Chris, the pastor from Paradise. And you will notice if you're watching versus listening, which, Chris, we do have more people watching now than we used to. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, you'll notice that Chris is at his house. He's at his new home.
Yeah.
Got a killer deer above him to the left.
Yeah. That's actually... What's crazy is that's my wife's deer. So
Are
there
you
you
serious?
go.
All right.
Mine's on the other side. You can't see it.
Okay.
It's so much bigger. I mean, it's hard to explain.
Oh my goodness. Is it good to be back in your house?
It is
in a
great
house you
to be.
own.
Yes. And, it's just nice to have a space that's yours to rest, relax, refresh. But I will say all we've done is unpack boxes and hang stuff like every day and every night. It's great, but man, I saw the stuff I lived without for so long. I open a box and I'm like, why do I keep this again? So
it might be time to get rid of that too, huh?
Man, we've been getting rid of so much stuff. And what's funny is that, when we packed up, we got rid of a ton of stuff, but even now it's like, get rid of more. So
yeah. Well, it's funny. The folks that are, military folks that listen, they're going to resonate with what you're talking about right now because they get to do it sometimes every 2 to 3 years now. Our family has been very unique in that God has not led us that way. But they know exactly what you're talking about. They know exactly what you're going through and having to hang everything, find everything.
Oh yeah.
Any broken stuff? Because we sometimes feel like it's a sport by our movers. Now, granted, you didn't have movers. That we feel like it's a sport at our movers to see if like a lampshade can hold a 50-pound dumbbell or something.
This has been the best one yet, actually, and this is, I think, our 14th move since we've been married. So there's that.
Oh yeah. Do you realize you've moved more than me, and I'm in the military?
I know. Well,
do you realize that?
Try to catch me.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm good. I tell people all the time that the Lord has been very good to our family and the military, and we're to a certain extent not like every military family, and that we haven't moved that many times, and so I don't mind that, and that's okay to me.
Yeah. Well, we've moved a few times. Sometimes in the same town, we would take a position, move there, find a place temporarily while we're looking for another place, and then we'd end up, come to the end of that lease and either get a new rental or build something, buy something, or whatever. So ends up how we ended up with so many moves. But
and sometimes you do things that maybe don't make sense, something that God's calling you to do that didn't make sense at the time and may not make sense for a little bit longer. Yep. But like move out of the house that you had without a house to go to.
Yep. Sometimes God just leads you, right?
Yeah.
And you go. And I know we were supposed to. I can see God's hand all over it. We probably could do one of where we just talk about what God taught us in the last year. Yeah. I think that could be fun because I'm telling you, there's so much that as I look back, my life was impacted through that journey, and I don't think that it would have been impacted had I not followed God.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to take some leave. I'm going to be in the area. Definitely going to see the house. And maybe that's when we sit around and tell some stories. My son has been listening to the podcast and he's like, hey, I want to know how you became a Marine. I want to know how that happened. And I thought we had told that on the podcast. And as I looked for it and I went back to the one that I thought we told it on, we didn't. And so
all we really talked about, I think, is getting to the Naval Academy. I don't think that we talked about that and test pilot school. Those are the two but I don't remember you telling the story.
We didn't really tell much more than that. So anyway, we'll do that. We'll do that moving up. For this week, for me, it's been exciting. But God's hand has been pretty amazing, Chris. He just keeps going before me on everything that it is that's going on. And I told you that every now and then I'll stop and pray with the one of my lead guys there, and God answers prayers. There's times when you sit around and someone will give you a piece of information that you are not entirely certain why you got that information, but you listen, obviously you take it in, and then no more than 4 hours later it's required, and God's like, hey, I gave that to you for free.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it has been a blistering week, but it seems like it's gonna level out, and not level out at the bottom. Nothing levels out at the bottom for V22. There's no such thing. Um, but it is still one of the most impressive and aircraft on the planet. It's still one of the it's still in the safest category of all aircraft in the military. Um, I guess you could say arsenal, and in fact, like, it doesn't make the news for that, but it has lower mishap rates, Class A mishap rates, than some of our workhorses. But it just, every time something happens, because it does weird things, it's a plane that takes off vertically. People get extra excited, and so um, that's just part of it. It's part of the life. I knew that's what I was taking over when I got into it, but it's good to go into the holidays. I got a great team who's everybody seems like they're unplugging, which is good. And then we'll be basically coming out of there. Now, I'm not gonna lie, Chris, because of the last few weeks, and I still have kept up with normal, holiday shopping and this stuff, but it is hard to imagine that this podcast is going to drop only a few days before Christmas.
Yep. Yep. And we may take a break like we did last year.
Yeah.
Imagine for a week or so. Normally, last time was just a week. We may be able to get it in a week, but
I don't know.
because this will drop right before this will drop Christmas Adam.
Mm-hmm.
Because Adam comes before Eve.
I see what you did
Christmas
there.
Adam, and then the New Year. So yeah, I think we probably will just have one where we take off, so we can just be fully present with the family and
Yeah.
what have you.
And then
So-
what we'll do, I think, Chris, is we'll put, what I might do is make some shorts of some of the older ones, or maybe I don't know, I may have some extra time where I throw some stuff out, and we'll push some things up. This may give everybody an opportunity to catch up. Not everybody's caught up. I hear that all the time when I'm talking to folks, and so that's fine. Today we're continuing our work through Hebrews 11 and through the heroes of faith, the great examples of faith, as they call it.
Yeah.
And last week we talked about Enoch, and hopefully everybody enjoyed that one or found that one helpful in their personal walk with the Lord.
Mhm.
I listened to him again, partly because I listened to him with Joshua, my son, but also because I want to hear what we said, because we talk for however long, and then sometimes you lose track of what you actually said.
Yeah, well, and that's actually pretty funny because there's been several times I was like, "Oh, that was good. I didn't even write that down."
Right? I didn't even know I said that.
Well, or you. I mean, so wow,
yeah.
I forgot that we were in it, so it was good.
Well, did you know that Noah, for as big of a character as he is in the Bible, and as for controversial as he is, right? Because Noah's controversial.
He had some stuff.
Yeah. Well, he also only got one verse in Hebrews 11.
Yep.
Hebrews 11:7.
Hey, Robert.
What?
Knock knock.
Okay, who's there?
Noah.
Noah who?
Noah, good Christmas joke. Go ahead.
My goodness, we're gonna keep moving because if anybody heard that right now, they are probably
they're gonna use it. Is what they're gonna do. They're gonna use it with someone that doesn't listen.
No, they're gonna be sad. They're gonna be sad they had to listen. All right, so hey, our story does begin today in Hebrews 11:7, and I do want to read kind of what, like I said we would do, Hebrews 11:1 and 2, right? It says, faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It is the evidence of things we cannot see. Through their faith, the people in the days of old earned a good reputation. By faith, we understand the entire universe was formed at God's command, that what we now see did not come from anything that can be seen. It's funny. I don't think we've read that how many times now, and it just hit me that in the beginning is ex nihilo, and it means out of nothing. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting that anything that can be seen. So interesting kind of connection there for those who are Bible nerds. But when we talk about it's the faith and reality of what we hope for, it's evidence of the things we cannot see. No better person to talk about than Noah, right?
Yep.
It was
Yep.
by faith that Noah built a large boat to save his family from the flood. He obeyed God, who warned him about things that had never happened before. Yeah, right?
That's the crazy part.
We'll come back. By his faith, Noah condemned the rest of the world, and he received the righteousness that comes by faith. And so we go back to it's the evidence of things we cannot see. And to your point, what you laughed at is he warned God, who warned him about things that had never happened before. Okay, that
Yeah.
is crazy stuff. So the the story starts in Genesis 6, but before we get there, I just want to point out a few things. Is that he gets, I guess you could say, credited for faith, is that he obeyed God, right? That's one of the things it says. Some translations say out of reverent regard or reverent fear or holy fear for God's command, he obeyed God. And then it was through his faith that Noah condemned the world. In other words, God looked the world over and only found one person blameless, and it was Noah, and it was through his faith. So kind of what point God's making here is it wasn't for lack of ability to know, it was for lack of obedience.
Yeah.
Because everybody knew. They knew because they saw Noah.
Yeah. And if you flip over to Genesis chapter 6,
Let's do it.
It says that it starts with, this is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, but the only blameless person living on earth at the time, and he walked in close fellowship with God. So much in that one statement.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, everyone knew that there was a better standard, right? But I like it says the only blameless person living on earth.
Yeah.
In other words, no one else could have looked at Noah and said, "Oh yeah, but he does this," or "Oh yeah, but he does that," right? So when he says this, it's saying, man, not only was he it wasn't one of those things of God just said he was righteous. Even people walking the earth would have looked at him and go, "No, Noah's a really good dude." So there was actually the ability for them to look at their own life and go, "Yeah, we don't do that, but Noah does. Noah's just different, right? He's just built different."
Yeah. Right.
And it says he walked in close fellowship with God. And that's what we talked about even with Enoch, is he walked with God. What does it look like to walk with God? What does it look like to daily go on a journey with God? And I think that that's really the point even of this podcast, is that transformational faith is a daily walk with God. It is a daily meeting, letting God lead the walk, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Following God where he takes us, where he leads us. It makes me think of Psalm 23, the Lord's our shepherd. I'll have everything I need. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. That is a picture of a shepherd leading his sheep to a place of rest, to a place of refreshing, to, like, if we will follow, even when it comes to the next few verses, says, even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, even I'll walk through it, right? There's going to be times that you follow him and you're following him and you still find yourself in a time of stress and a time of just difficult times. That was Noah, right?
Yeah.
I mean, where he just followed God, he did not make his life easier. His life became a whole lot more difficult for so many reasons. And so the story of Noah actually goes on and says, he has 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, verse 11, I thought this was interesting. God saw that the earth had become corrupt and was filled with violence. God observed all this corruption in the world, for everyone on earth was corrupt. So God said to Noah, I have decided to destroy all living creatures, for they fill the earth with violence. Yes, I will wipe them all out along with the earth. He's basically, this is one of those things where he says he warned Noah of something that had never happened before.
Yeah.
So he starts by saying, I'm going to wipe everything out. I know you've never seen it, but why? Because people were corrupt. Everything that God observed when the world was corrupt, it was filled with violence. God can't, because he's a holy God.
Yeah.
Um, there's a righteous judgment for sin. There's a righteous, that he's a right judge, meaning that he can't overlook evil and not give it its righteous judgment. So he looks on the earth and goes, "Hey, the only one righteous is Noah," and so I'm going to use him. I'm going to use now. What's interesting, he uses even his family. Now,
Yeah.
notice only Noah was the one that was found righteous. We're going to see later that Noah and his whole family were rescued. Right? God rescues the righteous remnant. But I want to say this: I believe that there is a covering, a spiritual authority that we have, that we can stand in the gap for our families, that we can stand in the gap. Now, they still can make choices. They can still choose to do their own thing. Shem, Ham, and Japheth still had to follow Noah onto the boat.
Yep.
If they didn't, it wouldn't have mattered. But
Yeah.
he's the one who took the stand. And then God tells him to build a large boat and how to build it, how big to make it. It was really long, basically 3 football fields long. Um, hey, have you ever gone to the museum in Kentucky? We talked about this when I
No,
was
I didn't
there.
go. You
Okay,
mentioned it when
we talked
one of
about
our
this on the
podcasts.
podcast. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it makes me think of that. But just it's enormous. This enormous boat tells I'm about to cover the earth. With a flood. What's a flood, right? At this
Yeah.
point, there had never been rain on the earth. So
Yep.
the idea that he was going to cause it to flood
It was funny. I was thinking about
is a
that
new
too.
thing.
So I got a bunch of thoughts here. We may
Go
have to
for it.
back up,
Yep,
but
you're fine.
real quick. But we'll start there because I was thinking about this morning after I had read this before, and just to get my memory jogged on Noah. And there's so many things in here that pique my imagination. One of the ones though is what you just said. It's that idea of God was going to do something that never happened before. In this case, it was rain. Well, I was sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, what could I imagine that's never happened before? And then I realized, like, there's literally nothing that I could
Yeah.
imagine that has never happened before because everything I can imagine is something that I'm imagining because I've either seen it before, or it's happened before, or whatever. And so it's kind of funny if you consider the fact that the Lord gave him
Hey, Robert,
pre knowledge of
there's
something that never happened.
there's going to be a rolled tonight.
Rolled.
Yeah, a rolled is going to hit the earth, and it's just going to destroy everything. A rolled.
Okay.
I mean, that's what it would be like,
No,
right?
I know. Right. I know. And everybody around him's probably like,
What
okay.
are you saying? Can you spell that?
Sorry, don't know what that is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
because that's essentially what God just did.
No,
I'm gonna cover the
100%.
earth with a flood, or basically, I'm gonna cover the earth with a rolled.
I'm going to make it rain and I'll make the water come up out of the bottom. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing for it. And he's going to cover the entire place where everything that has breath is no longer allowed to live. Now, I want to back up if that's okay to verse 9. It says, no, you hit it that Noah was blameless. And the thing that when I was looking at the blameless, it had a word kind of like you can like look at the word and it talks about the Hebrew term. And, I don't speak Hebrew, but I do appreciate the folks who do and actually add extra notes. And if you're ever wondering how to study the Bible a little bit easier without getting into extra, the New English translation has lots of little cliff notes, lots of little extra notes that if you have it on your Bible app on your phone, you can push the little note button and it gives you lots of extra words. If you go to like even Bible Gateway, they have the little notations. You can look at it. And blameless in this case is an idiom. It says walk before. And in other words, it says that he maintained a proper relationship with. So Noah was blameless. So his faith in God led him to be blameless. In other words, led him to be obedient. He lived in a proper relationship with the Lord. And so if you're wondering how to what faith does, and Chris talks about this, faith should change the way we live. It should be that transformational piece. Faith inspires, or faith brings us to obedience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
it's in that obedience that we're found blameless. And that was kind of the same way. It did talk a little bit about his contemporaries, and he was really basically says among his contemporaries, but what basically he's saying, Noah's the only person in that entire generation in his entire contemporary, like everyone that was considered blameless. There was no one else. And to your point, he had his sons. Now I have down a little bit further in the text, I have some thoughts on that. But yeah, he maintained that proper relationship. And then it says he walked with God. And I thought this was probably my favorite part of this text, Chris,
Yeah.
because it talks about the only other time that this turn of phrase is used, not the in this way or whatever, not the only, but one of the times it was used in this way was actually when it referred to David and Nabal's men when they
Yeah.
walked in the fields, and essentially like this rubbing of shoulders because they're walking so close to each other, they're literally shoulder to shoulder.
That's a cool picture.
Yeah, and then if you put that in the fact that Noah is walking with the Lord, walking
Rubbing shoulders with God. That's kind of what
right
it's saying,
shoulder
right?
to
That's so cool.
shoulder. Yeah, I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
to me, it was mind blowing, and so I think to myself, like, what would that look like, right, in my own life? What does it look
Yeah.
like to rub shoulders with the Lord? What does it look like to walk with?
That's good.
And so, yeah, it's that close proximity, and I think we've talked about it all the time. And close proximity, one of the ways we get close proximity is we actually stop and spend time with Him in the morning. We spend time with Him throughout the day. It's okay to pray yourself to sleep. God doesn't mind if you go to sleep. He knows you need rest. And on your recommendation, Chris, I read this book about humility and how one of the, I guess you could say, practices of humility was to end your day giving thanks for everything that the Lord has given you and fall asleep to that, because
Yeah.
it's this idea that you are taking time to recognize there's nothing that happened in that daytime that didn't come from the good hand of the Father.
Yeah.
And so it's okay to kind of be in that way. So if you're thinking, okay, what are ways I can walk with? We all know what it means to be obedient. But man, I can't believe I just thought of this. I literally wrote this morning. I was in James, and
Hey.
it was talking about the acts and how sinful acts are born out of um, lust or pride, or basically a desire to do what we want to do versus something else. And I wrote in there like, hey God, I know myself. I know I can't self will myself into this. Like, I need your help through the power of the Holy Spirit to align my life, align everything about me to you, so that when that sense of self, whether it's pride or self entitlement, or which is basically selfishness, which is still pride if you really get back to it, right? When that stuff comes in, I really have to be able to be pulled in, and honestly, I have to be empowered by Him, and it is a walking with Him that allows me to be obedient. So if I were to back this up, right, it's easy to be obedient, or easier to be obedient. I mean, we're still sinful man, right? But it's easier to be obedient when you're walking in close proximity with the Lord. And so, anyway, and that's kind of what I wrote this morning in my journal. I was like, Lord, help me to be in close proximity to you. Help me to run to you so that I can resist the devil and he will flee from me,
Yeah,
which
that's
that's
good.
where I was
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
area. So, yeah. And then I think one
Hey,
other
Robert,
thing.
think
Yeah, go
about
ahead.
this. Isn't it easier to not make poor choices when you are rubbing shoulders with God? When you have you're walking so closely with God, you have a continual awareness of His presence with you.
I call it eyes up. I call it eyes up fellowship. Does it make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
Like, I tell people a lot of the time, like when I am at my worst, I'm navel gazing. I'm looking at myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
looking at myself. I'm like, I'm worrying about me. But when I get my eyes up on Him, and I tell folks, I say, hey, keep your eyes up, get your eyes up. And it's not, I'm not talking like our physical eyes. I'm talking about our spiritual eyes. Get your eyes up. Hey, get your eyes up. I know you're in a really terrible state. I know that life sucks for you. I know maybe you're going into the holidays and you're missing somebody. You're going on holidays and you don't have what you think you need to take care of your family or take care of your others or to give gifts that you want. And all that can just really get us down. But when we get our eyes up, get your eyes up on Him,
Yeah.
then that stuff kind of falls away. It just
I,
fades away. It just
I
doesn't
just,
matter.
and I think that's what I mean. I tell people often when I encourage them to read, get a plan and read through Scripture. We encourage this every year at Grace. I have a couple plans I recommend to people, but
It's still in the show notes.
I
Still in the show
tell
notes.
yeah, I tell people all the time that the thing that has changed my life the most is not like this one massive moment where I
Mm.
heard a great message or podcast or had this big aha moment in scripture. It's the little bit day after day. And I'll say of just reading scripture and letting it change the way I think and it changes the way I live. But ultimately, that's just a part of learning to walk and rub shoulders with God. It's every day waking up. Man, this morning I was excited. I was to get up because nobody was up. I got a cup of coffee.
Yeah, I
Got
know, right?
to do some reading and some, you know,
Without
thinking,
anybody
and
interrupting you and
yeah,
all of those.
it
Yeah,
was
no, I know what you mean.
fantastic. So
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating how much I love those times. And I was thinking about when you were talking about your story of, we're reading through this, but you're telling about your story about, hey, I'm back in the house and I got all this stuff going and we're finally here where God has us and the rest. And, I was joking with you sort of because I knew what Noah had went through, that God asked him to do something he had never heard of before.
yeah,
And for you, had God ever told you, hey, I want you to sell your house and move into and dot, dot, dot?
yeah, no, that was definitely a new step for us. I mean, a huge new step. And I'm telling you, there's some people who still don't understand it. What's crazy is our realtor, she's been awesome. She walked with us through it, and she was like, "Guys, I'm with you in this." And
That's
because we'd
awesome.
stop and we'd pray at a house, and we'd essentially leave and go, "Yeah, like, great house, just not the right one." Because we
Yeah.
were just asking God, God, we didn't start this journey without you. You're the one who sent us on this journey. You're the one who asked us to start building the boat that we had, didn't understand.
For what
But
reason?
yeah, but we know that you told us to do this, so we stepped out, and then God came through, and honestly, Robert, I don't think it's the end of the story. I think
No,
it like,
absolutely
and I
not.
think that that's the part that I think people don't understand is that it's not like when the story ends until you're able to look back and go, oh, that's when that. But then he set me out on a new journey. But really, it's a continual walking with Jesus, rubbing shoulders with Jesus, and letting Him dictate the way that story goes. And I think that that's the part we have to learn to do better.
I think
Um,
it's
be,
both. Yeah, I think it's both a preparation and a refinement, right? So,
right.
it refines us in the moment. It refines us to be more like Him, to be a more of a better picture of Him. And it's, when you hang out with folks, you tend to become like them. I find the guy that is my deputy right now, I end up
Mm-hmm.
talking like him,
Oh
which
boy,
is
is he a
hilarious.
northerner?
He is.
Oh my
And
gosh,
he'll say things
you're
like,
turning into a Yankee.
no, no, no. He'll say he doesn't talk like that. But he
Okay.
is, but he doesn't like that. Let me paint a picture for you, Tim. Let me paint a picture. I'm going to paint a picture. All right. Let me paint this picture. And I will, no doubt, more times I've done it more times where I was like, oh, hang on, let me paint this picture for you. And then I'm like, what? That's not even
What
my
am I
phrase.
doing? Yeah, that's
But
so
but
good.
the point is I live in close proximity with him as I work, right? And so
Yeah,
when we live in close proximity with the Lord, then we start sounding more like him.
yeah.
We
People give me a
sound like him.
hard time when I'm around somebody with a thick country accent.
Yeah.
I easily put on the thick country accent.
Oh, buddy.
And Robert, growing up, I probably had a little bit of one. Actually, I know I did. After the first time I heard myself preach, I was like, oh my gosh, I sound so country. And I was
Yes,
like,
you do.
so I slowly worked on it. And for those who still think I have a country accent, I'm telling you, it's not what it once was.
Yeah.
But if I still get around those people again, I start sounding like him. And here's, I think, your point is that when you
Yeah.
start getting around God, you start sounding like Him to some degree,
That's
right? You
exactly what I'm
you
talking
start
about.
acting like Him. Uh, and honestly, Robert, I've said this before too. There's a lot of people who think, well, you can't do this because you're a pastor. You can't do this because you're a Christian. You can't. And it's not that I can't. It's not that I don't because I can't. I don't because I don't want to. Right?
Yeah.
It's
It's not
not that
there.
God changed what I could or couldn't do. God has slowly changed my want to. I don't have a desire to. I don't, that's not. There's nothing appealing in that to me. Why? Because little by little, God is changing me as I would learn to walk with Him. And here's the deal: I'm not trying to paint a picture that I'm perfect and got it
Oh,
figured
I
out,
know what you mean.
because
Yeah.
I can lose it just like anybody else. Driving down the road, I can't stand selfish people who almost cause accidents because they don't merge when everybody else is supposed to. All right. If you feel convicted right now, that's not me speaking, it's the Holy Spirit. All right. I'm just saying.
You just sound like the Holy Spirit. That's it. You've spent a lot of time
Oh
with him
man.
and you sound like him. So if you heard him, then that's what you heard.
But in reality,
Yeah.
I can lose it sometimes, and then I'm like, man, that wasn't right, and I know
Yeah.
it.
Hey, the
So
one thing I want to jump back in on this thing, and we'll jump into verse 12 because
okay, go
I
for it.
don't think this can be understated over. I don't know. I mean, when you really look at verse 12 and it says, God saw that, my version, it's New English translation. It says, God saw that the earth, and indeed it was ruined. Like you can't undersee, like you can't undersee that, like underestimate it, undersee it, play it down. He saw the earth and it was ruined, for all
Yeah,
living creatures. All living
yeah,
creatures on earth were sinful. And
hmm,
some translations take it to, humans, all humanity, all humankind, but the flesh here is both consistent for humankind and animals.
that's right.
It's
Well,
all living creatures. And so when God's saying he's going to destroy the earth, it's because he saw all living creatures. And so there's a couple things that makes my imagination run on this one. I'm not
yeah,
going to lie. Like,
yeah,
okay, so how much did creatures, uh, what can I say, moral lies beforehand, right? Your dog, you always know when your dog has done something wrong, right? Because the
oh yeah,
dog like really clearly knows he did something wrong. So to like
yeah,
a weird, like microscopic sense, we have an idea of kind of what that looks like in all living creatures. But the Lord is saying the earth was ruined and it was all living creatures. It wasn't just humankind, because the entire earth was sinful.
yeah. Well, and it was subjected to the effects of sin too. I mean, their sin had an effect. It makes me think of Romans 8, 19. 8:19 says,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
all creation is waiting eagerly for the future day when God will reveal who his children really are. And then it says this, verse 20, because against its will all creation was subjected to God's curse.
Yep. And so
But
actually,
with
no, go ahead.
eager
Sorry, finish
hope,
it up.
sorry,
Yeah.
but with eager hope, the creation, all of creation, looks forward to the day when it will join God's children in glorious freedom from death and decay.
Yep.
So when people look around and go, man, why did God, why is there so much bad things and harsh things and death, destruction, disease in the world? Why did God do this? God didn't. That's not the way he made it. It was our sin that subjected the world to these things. It's the sin that ushered those things in, and it's the curse of sin that he's looking at and going, man, people have taken this to a whole nother level, and it's destroying everything that I made.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I want to draw out of it. You're like reading my mind here. It's the impact of sin.
Yeah,
The impact of sin wasn't localized to the individual.
right.
It was it was spread to everything.
Globalized,
It was
really.
global. The impact of sin
Yeah,
was global. And so
yeah,
sometimes we think, because we're a little bit selfish, and I'm Betty, I'm the same way. I
yeah,
can be selfish and I'm like, oh, this sin is just me. This sin is, whatever. But what I don't recognize is that it opens the door to all kinds of other things.
yep.
And the impact we have with our sin is not just local. It does impact everything. It impacts not just our relationship with the Lord, because it does impact our relationship with the Lord, but it also greatly impacts our relationships with everyone else. And in fact, everything else,
Hmm.
every living creature. And so that's really what we see here. And so when the Lord's going to destroy the earth, we got to understand the depth of depravity here. That if we go back to, I think it's 6:5, not to go too far back, but that the wickedness of humankind had become so great on the earth, every inclination of the thought of their mind was evil all the time.
Hmm.
Okay. So when folks find controversy on like the Lord destroyed the world, saved Noah, well, it was ugly, man. I don't know that I even would want to be alive in during that time
Right,
frame.
right.
That's how ugly it was. Like we think it's ugly now. I don't think we compare. I
No.
don't think we come close. I think during this time frame, it was get what you can what you get, and you know, kill everybody else to do it. It was bad
Hmm.
times. So I say all that, and now one of the things that I want to land on, which we do have a little bit of time to chat about, just because I think this is a piece of this that I noticed as I was reading it, is that all say, oh no, and Noah did all that God commanded him. This is verse 22. He did all that God commanded him. He did indeed. In other words, it doubles down on the obedience Noah had to what God told him to do. He did every little bit of it. And then as you read through chapter 7, not that I want to read through chapter 7, but in 7:5, it says, and Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. And then it gets into 7:9, Noah, just as God had commanded him. And then it gets into 7:11. Is it 11? No, sorry, 16. And it also says, just as God had commanded him. And it really drives home through the next chapter or so the number of times that God commanded Noah to do something and Noah did everything that the Lord commanded him to do.
Immediate obedience, right? That's what obedience is. His faith was demonstrated that this is how he demonstrated his faith, just as God commanded him to. That's what he did.
Yep. Do you remember what mom and dad used to say to us when we were growing up?
Obedience
what is
is
obedience?
Doing what you're told to do when you're told to do it with the right heart attitude, which I now have my boys say with a good attitude, because I was like, what's a right heart attitude? In other words, not a left heart. It's got to use your right heart,
only
not your left heart.
Only the right.
Yes.
Yeah. So, no, that's so like early, 2000s.
Yeah.
Right heart attitude.
That's what we said back then.
It's a good attitude. No, you're right. Obedience is doing what you're told to do when you're told to do it with a good attitude. And I think it is all three parts, right? It doesn't say that Noah here did what God commanded him to do, but was, I'm going to say, ticked about it, grumpy about it, bad mood about it. I mean, I remember many times where mom and dad would be like, hey, Robert, go do whatever it was. And because you do that, remember how you do the mental math as a kid? The mental math is, all right, so they told me to do this. If I don't do that, then I'm going to get this consequence. All right, I'm going to weigh the consequence versus what I'm told to do. It's just not really worth it. I'll go do it. I won't be happy about it, but I'll go do it anyway. Yeah. The number of times that I went and did it anyway. And then what's funny is, as parents, mom and dad would be like, hey, you're like, what? You're like, right heart attitude.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to be happy about it, but I'm going to do it.
I might be standing up on the outside, but I'm sitting down on the inside.
I know, right? But is that obedience?
No, it's not.
Is that obedience?
That's not. I don't think that's the picture of what Noah did here.
I know,
Robert.
Right?
Something else that stands out to me, and I don't want to jump rails too much, but
no, jump. Go ahead.
But we talked about that people's sin affected more than just themselves.
Yeah.
Did you notice that Noah's faith affected more than just himself?
Right. Yes.
I think this is huge, and we kind of hit this earlier. But
can you
sin affected?
Read chapter 7, verse 7.
Well, let me start.
After you get
7:1 says,
that's fine.
The Lord said to Noah, "Come into the ark, you and all your household, for I consider you godly among this generation. I consider you," and talking to Noah, I consider you godly among. Sorry, I was gonna try to pull this. Never mind. I was gonna try to pull up the Hebrew there, but it's not wanting to do that for me. But it was considers him godly. Then verse 7, Noah entered the ark along with his wife, and his sons' wives because of the floodwaters, right?
And animals, and clean animals, unclean animals, birds, creeps, the ground. It's only because of Noah.
Can I show you one other thing I'd never seen before? Maybe you have.
Sure.
Verse 7:2 says, "You must take with you 7 of every kind of clean animal."
Yeah.
The male and its female. 2 of every kind of unclean animal, the male and its female. 7 of every kind.
Yeah.
You ever seen that? 7 pairs of every kind of clean. I didn't realize that there were 7 of every
Yeah.
kind of clean animal. So I thought that was fascinating. It's like, what? Because I'd always thought,
Well, and
just
then
two by two.
seven pairs of every kind of bird, which is also
Right.
really interesting because we do hear the two by two story, and so it does make me again wonder maybe if I had time to study it more to understand why seven of every clean animal, um, and maybe it's because that's what he was allowed to eat. I don't know, but it's hard to
Yeah, I don't
know.
know.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what they didn't eat on the ark?
What did they not eat? This is a dad joke. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well,
I give
they
up.
had a hard time fishing. You know why they had a hard time fishing?
Why?
Because he only had two worms.
Okay, that was funny.
All right,
That
thanks.
was funny. I'll give you that one. I'll give you
Uh,
that one. Yeah, no, it is. It is interesting that in the same way that the earth was ruined by sin, the impact of sin, the impact of righteousness. In this case, what you're seeing is the impact of righteousness saved both Noah and his family and the rest of the living creation that God had set apart for living from the flood. And so, I think in the same way that we sometimes view our sin as not having a huge impact, I think it's encouraging to know
it's
that
huge.
your righteousness has an impact
That's right.
in and on those around you.
So, regardless of your family background, what anyone else in your family is doing, think about this. You could change the trajectory of your family
I know,
for
right?
generations to come by your faithfulness to God. Like, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter. What matters is, will you do what God tells you to do just as He told you to? Will you walk with Him? Will you rub shoulders with Him so that you know when He's talking to you, so He know what He wants you to do? Because the question, it comes back to this: is um, it was by Noah's faith, right?
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
by faith that Noah did something that he'd never heard of before, and he did it anyway. Why? Because God told him to. Who knows? God may be asking you to do something that you didn't see demonstrated in your family growing up. You didn't see, maybe to parent in a way that's different. Maybe it's to do your marriage in a way that's different. Maybe it's to get plugged into your church in a way that you didn't see growing up because it just, church wasn't a big deal. But whatever it is, the truth is that if you'll just do whatever God's asking you to do, just as He says to do it, you won't have to worry about changing the generations to come. God can use your faith to do it.
yeah.
You just do what God tells you to do.
No, it's you talked about it last podcast, and um we maybe this is where we start landing the plane on this one, but you talked about it last podcast, and you talked about how mom and dad, when we were growing up, they went and did this big, I think it was Life Action was the group at the time,
Yep.
who changed the way they lived. They changed the way they parented. It changed the way they did everything. And we were different. We didn't get to watch certain shows that, frankly, if I said it right now, we'd probably get a lot of hate mail.
Yeah,
Um,
people make fun of us still to this day.
yeah. I mean, I sort of make fun
What
of
you
myself. I know.
yeah.
For all intents and purposes, we probably should have been wearing web belts, with our shirts tucked in. And you know what I'm
Hey,
talking
dude, we
about.
did. We
I
did.
know.
What are you
I
talking about?
know. I know, right? Um, but they both came from a family who didn't. That's not necessarily. They didn't have the same standards. They didn't have the same living, I guess you could say, type stuff. And I do remember the days early before Life Action where I'd wake up and we'd listen to just regular normal music that everybody probably in the United States listens to. There's probably nothing different in our household than any other one, in a
Mm,
lot of ways. But then I do remember the change where um, I would be willing to bet good money that what we listened to, what we did, what we were allowed to do, what we were coached to do, what the example that was laid for us did not look like any other household in the United States. It was in our family that it made it look different. And Chris, I look back and it was interesting as I went through college and then I went through the military and the rest. I tell people I was intensely blessed by the fact that I had a family who both loved the Lord and showed it in everything they did in their daily actions and all the things. And while not perfect at all, certainly not perfectly correct in all the various things, we could have been probably way more conservative than they, in the way they controlled, whatever around us. But they didn't. But I mean, they did. They were different, and that different aspect, they were different in a way that was obedient to God. It were different in a way that I would tell you right now, there's no doubt in my mind that mom and dad rubbed shoulders with the Lord. They were in close walk and a close
Yep.
relationship, close fellowship with the Lord. And because of that, that impact, that righteous impact that we see here with Noah, it impacted everything else.
Yep.
Generations, frankly. Me, you, Lou,
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah.
generations. And it's
Generations.
because they were the generational change. And so you're right, you can be a generational change. I
Yep.
tell my kids all the time, if you ever decide to go do something different, and they certainly can, they certainly might. There is such thing as prodigal kids. That's a real thing. I tell them, like, you will not have a good excuse.
That's right.
it's
That's
just
right.
You're just not going to
Yeah.
have a good excuse.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think about this is that if you ever find yourself feeling like, well, I could do it this way because I think this way God wants me to, but I feel like I'm the only one doing this, or I don't feel like there's anyone else doing things my way. I don't know. Maybe when you look at Noah, maybe that's not such a bad thing.
I know, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, we are going to skip a week. We love the fact that y'all are walking with us. This is, I think, episode 68. I'll probably be present down there, and we'll throw a few more episodes on.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. And, whenever you watch this is around Christmas for us. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's, and all that other stuff. We love you. We thank the Lord that you walk with us. Before we even pray, we just pray that God speaks through us and directly to you. I'll get you last words as we wrap here, Chris.
Hey, just simple stuff. One is if you don't have a place to celebrate Christmas, find a local church, or you can
Amen.
join us online. Our church online will
Yeah.
have six services. Okay,
No excuse.
2 on the 23rd online, 5 and 7. 4 on the 24th, 1, 3, 5, and 7, and then we will rebroadcast on Christmas Day, I think, at 5 and 7. But you can find out all of that on our website, gf.church. The watch/watch.
Okay.
You can
Okay.
find it there. But would love for you to join us online. We're on Facebook, YouTube. We have an online platform there. There's so many ways. But we'd love for you to join us, celebrate Christmas with us. Grateful that you walk with us. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. And I'll see you see you or talk to you next year.
Yeah. Love y'all. Bye. Thank you for taking time to join us today. Our prayer is that you are encouraged in your own journey as you let faith transform the way you live. If you enjoyed hanging with us today, let us know by leaving us a 5-star review and sharing our podcast with others. We look forward to discussing what God is doing in our lives in our next episode.